Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us in our first Zoom chat conversation with the amazing Dr. Pam Luster. She is president at San Diego Mesa College, one of the fastest growing colleges in our nation, and famously known as one of the equity avengers in California higher education. Dr. Luster, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Michelle.
I was talking to Dr. Luster a few weeks ago about the impact of COVID on higher education and most especially on our most vulnerable students that we know have been disproportionately impacted by what has been obviously a terrible and difficult year for all of us. But for those that are most vulnerable, for low-income students, for Black and Latinx students in particular, our Indigenous students, truly affected disproportionately by COVID. And of course, she did not disappoint because she comes to the table with solutions and thoughts about how to respond in a more equitable fashion and provide those kinds of supports to students. So that's what today's conversation is about. But first, Dr. Luster, would love for you to tell our audience that may not be as familiar with San Diego Mesa College a little bit more about the college.
Sure. San Diego Mesa College is one of 3 credit institutions in the San Diego Community College District, along with City College, Miramar College, and our very large College of Continuing Education. Mesa serves about 22,000 students a semester. We are a proud Hispanic serving institution. Mesa is in the center of the district, so we are what's called north of Highway 8. But right at the nexus of some major freeways. And so we're very easy to get to for lots of folks. We are a minority majority institution. About 40% of our students are Latinx. About 7% of our students are Black, African American. If you combine Asian Pacific Islander, Asian and Filipino, about 17%. And so we are very much focused on racial equity as a part of our work at the institution. We're a fairly young college. Over half of our students are between 18 and 24. So we'd have a fairly traditional, what you might call, community college group. And about 65% of our students are part-time, about 35 or so percent are part-time. So a really vibrant community because of its San Diego. Several thousand veterans and military dependents. So we have a very strong focus on our veteran population as well.
Awesome. And when the pandemic hit, we saw community colleges just rapidly respond to distance education. Can you share what some of the biggest challenges were that you faced in doing that and how you tackled them?
Yeah, time was our biggest challenge. How to not disrupt, how to create instructional continuity in that moment in March. Had it been January or May, that might have been a different thing. But here we were, first few weeks of the semester. Imagine being a first-time college student or even a second semester college student, and the leadership just got in a room together and we said, we're going to cancel classes for a week. We're going to do a calling in of our faculty. We're going to bring them together and into our loft space, which is our Learning for Transformation Teaching and Learning Center. We're going to buddy people up and we're going to see what we can do to get all of these courses into what we called a remote learning format. Some faculty still were doing synchronous work. Some went complete asynchronous, but many had never taught an online course, even if they had Canvas shells. And I will tell you, having an infrastructure at the college for online learning and having a space where we have an instructional designer, technologists who could help faculty was huge for us. And then the district-wide infrastructure of training for online. So we just called a timeout, called everybody in, said to the students, breathe for a week, figure out your situations, and we'll be back to you in a week. And it wasn't perfect. But we did what we could. But I think the first thing was let's all get in the room together and figure out how to do this together.
You all responded in incredible ways, and I hope you know how incredibly amazed and proud we were in cheering you all on, because it was a Herculean task and you all did it so well. Dr. Luster, can you talk a little bit about how the pandemic has affected your students in particular?
Yeah, we've been doing a lot of reaching out. In the spring semester, we lost thousands of students, and we immediately reached out to students. We embedded a tool right in each Canvas shell so that students could answer questions for us along the way, because we knew every student was there. And so we asked, what do you need? And whether it was emergency funding, a computer, a piece of technology, mental health support, were they in a cohort group? Had they checked in with their counselor, whether it's Puente, Emoja, whatever those might be? So our first message to students was, let us be your community. Like, don't leave us. And even if you drop out, we're still part of you. And so let us help you. And so I think that the students were impacted immediately by loss of jobs, by just the disorientation of not being able to be around other human beings. And for students who are already marginalized in terms of unhoused or had food insecurity, mental health challenges, whatever that might be, they just couldn't hang. I mean, I'll just be honest and say, when we asked, what do you need from us? And they said, we really appreciate that you're here for us, but we just can't do this right now. We have kids at home. We have jobs we're trying to do from home if we still have our jobs. But what we did is we reached out. And for every single student that took an EW, which was an excused withdrawal from the spring, we called them, physically called them. We had students call students and asked them what we could do to help them, to
And
get
I
them back
heard
in
you
there.
also made calls.
Yes. And we're about to do that again. There's another question coming up where I'll answer that, but yes. And I have relationships with some students. In fact, I'm Zooming with one later today who's one of our lead tutors. I find in talking to students who are serving in peer roles like that, the students are telling them what they need. They may not want to be formal with someone like me, the president calls you, you think you're in trouble, right? But I think really being in touch with the peers that are working with their students right now is really critical. But students needed money. They needed help right away.
Yeah. So talk to us about, what equity looks like in
Mhm.
a pandemic. So how did you tackle, everybody's affected,
Right.
but of course some students are affected more than others. How did you tackle that?
Well, the first thing we did, I'll talk about the CARES funds a little bit. When we were first alerted that we were getting CARES funds and we knew how much that was going to be. And I will tell you, our associated students immediately came up with $20,000 of their own money towards emergency aid. Our college foundation did that. So within about 2 weeks, we had $60,000 in cash from private funds that we were able to get out. And then, of course, $1.5 million, I think, to the rest of the students. Um, and what we did is we disaggregated the data. We looked at who qualified. And of course, we went through that horrible Department of Ed, DACA Dreamer students didn't qualify. But we were lucky that we had the United Way in San Diego came forward with money for DACA Dreamer students who didn't qualify. So we knew who they were. And we started disaggregating it, and we started looking at socioeconomic status, financial need. I mean, we have thousands of Pell eligible students. We have thousands of College Promise students, but we looked for number of units being taken. Had they already been previous recipients of some of the services that we already used in terms of our Stand Resource Center, food pantry, housing assistance. And then we made some tough decisions. One of the best decisions we made was to not give a grant any less than $500. It didn't mean fewer students got the $500, but the $500 was impactful for those who were most in need. And then we started to pull in funds and supports from other places. So if we couldn't give you cash, we made sure you got a laptop. If we couldn't give you cash, we made sure that you were there for our drive up food distribution. So we like to see it as yes and, right? Like, we're going to do this and we're going to try to do this. But we disaggregated the data and we looked to see who was most in need. And it did change from our first distribution changed a little bit based on who we saw were of greatest need.
I love that, because it feels like you really dug deep and maybe we're really obviously thoughtful about how to distribute resources and funds. one of the things I've heard from you and a few other community college leaders is that there are things and practices that amidst this challenging pandemic, you all want to keep moving
Yeah,
forward. Can you
yeah,
talk about some of that and especially around, this sort of the equity lens to that too?
yeah. I'm really excited. You know, honestly, there's not much that excites me about this period of time with, just, well, you know what I'm saying? There's just so much struggle that I can't say that I'm enjoying this time. But what I will say I'm hopeful about is that we will learn what students really need and not what we have always wanted to do for them or on behalf of them. We're going to do what they tell us they need and want. I think student services has completely been transformed in this. And while there's nothing like sitting across from your counselor and having that session, which I think students really need, if I'm an adult learner with 3 children at home, I am loving my web sessions with my counselor that are scheduled at 8 o'clock at night,
Great
right?
point.
And there are faculty who are more than willing to work non-traditional schedules because they have the same struggle.
Right.
So they'd much rather see their students from 7 to 10 at night because that's when their kids are off doing something else and they can focus. So I think we're going to have to be much more fluid about how we see our day, how we interact with students. And I think we're, the services piece. I see faculty who are really thriving in this online environment who never imagined that they would enjoy it. I'm one of them. I teach a class at San Diego State in the EDD program. And while I love the intimacy of the classroom, I am so much better now at discerning the content that my students actually need to know from me versus what they can learn asynchronously and then use those moments to really interact. So I think we've learned a lot. And I think that we've learned you do not have to get in your car or get on a bus and be on campus to get everything you need. But I also think we've learned that the disorientation and isolation is real. And that when we are on campus, we need to think about what does that community look like? How do we create a sense of belonging for the physicality of being on our campuses? But I think there's about 23 dissertations in, I'm sure we'll see many more than that. But there's so much research to be done on the learning. And there's so much research to be done on what has worked for people. I'm excited to see what that looks like. We are forever changed by this, and we should be.
Yeah, I love that because you're right. It is a difficult time. And you're proving that there's some silver linings, right? And some innovations that we want to keep and move forward that are good for faculty, they're good for staff, they're good for students. And I would love to do a whole session with you on just the sense of belonging, because that's what we find a lot of our campuses, the ones that succeed at providing a good environment for students that feel connected are the ones that really serve our students best. What would you share? So for the college leaders that are listening, and I know we pulled you away from a session where you're talking to college leaders, what would you want to see other leaders prioritize when it comes to student equity and responding to the challenges like the pandemic and other challenges that will come our way in the future?
I think that equity, and I'm going to speak to racial equity because my true belief is that when you focus on racial equity, there is an elevation of all other groups that have been historically minoritized. And so I am a big believer in the work of Estella Benjamin and others that speak to that. Every day in everything you do, that's the lens, period. So whether it's work, we just did a huge upheaval not upheaval, but a review of our scholarship programming. I would love to talk to you about that at another time. We just presented it and completely changed. We closed equity gaps in terms of who's getting scholarships now. And we didn't start that way. And our foundation board is actually leading the effort. So you have, private citizens, volunteers that are in the work. And whether it's how you build a facility, or we're in the middle of doing our 10-year Mesa 2030 plan right now. Can you imagine how that's changed since we started it? What will the next 10 years look like? To me, it's 1,000 different levers that you push and pull, but at the center of it is, are we listening to the voices that are with us, and have we built longer tables so that all those voices can be with us? And if you're not asking those questions about who you're hiring and how they look and what their experiences bring, if you're not looking at who's showing up on your campuses or who's disappearing from your campuses right now, because we know that Black and brown men is what is emerging for us right now, are having a lot of difficulty right now. We've not necessarily focused in on men as a group, other than the work that we've done with Doctors Wood and Harris around teaching men of color and some of those things. And so we're bringing some of those back. But I think leadership demands of us that we show up even when we're uncomfortable, even when we are, I mean, I'm a white woman of privilege, but it demands that I show up in spaces where I don't feel like I belong, because that's how my students feel. And that's how BIPOC people of our employees feel. And so why should that be any different for any of us? And so I think you continue to put yourself in spaces and places where you listen to understand, and then you act. And you just have to. And that's with resources, that's with your time, that's with your talent, and you make yourself vulnerable to say, I don't know everything, right? I don't. And those books on anti-racism can't just sit on your bookshelf. You have to read them. And otherwise you never do the equity walk, right?
Yeah. I could not have said it better. I so appreciate the way you talk about this work as building a longer table so that everyone can be invited to it, and have appreciated watching your leadership in doing that and practicing what you preach. And certainly anti-racism is a verb, right? What are we doing every single day in our own actions and our own disaggregating of data and analyzing and making ourselves feel uncomfortable, right? And I appreciate the humbleness that you bring to that. So thank you for that. To close out, I wanted to do a quick lightning round of questions for fun, but before the fun, the hard question, the governor has convened an equity task force for higher ed, thinking about the recovery, the economic recovery with equity. What are some of the roles that the state and the federal government need to play, in your opinion, to really support community colleges and, of course, advance equity?
I have to say, I am not insular about this. Our local businesses and local governance need money. We need to put our students back to work. We need people to be able to sustain themselves so that they can focus on learning. So while I would love money for community colleges and would continue to ask for emergency aid for our most needy, support for, for keeping in this remote environment, for the recovery of all of the kinds we've had to do things to be safe on our campuses, I would want all of those things, but I would like to see it balanced in communities. We need the economic development in our communities to come back. I don't know, many of our students are in restaurant work and those kinds of things, and that won't recover right away. So I think we need to be good community partners in this and say, get money to cities, get money to businesses, because a lot of our students own those businesses as well. And let's get back to focusing so that people have food, have a roof over their head, and can learn again. Focus in on the learning, because then we'll change the whole system.
Yes, you're absolutely right. Just quick questions to close this out. I think our listeners will want to hear some of your responses to this, but it has been a really difficult year. What has been your best quarantine survival tip or hack during this time?
Wow.
Quick, first thing off the
top. Business attire on the top, not so much everywhere else.
I think that's all of us.
I'm just being real.
I think we all relate.
Makes it quick.
What is the last book you read?
Last book I read, I'm reading it right now. Well, I'm rereading Equity Talk to Equity Walk because I'm teaching it right now. But I just read A Wolf Pack, the Abby Wambach book about women finding their power. It's a quick read and it's really good.
Oh, good. What's your favorite holiday?
Mother's Day.
Oh, well, happy early Mother's Day then.
Thank you.
What's in your Netflix queue or Hulu or Amazon Prime or?
Okay, so because I have a first and second grader in my life, we're watching Just Add Magic.
Ooh, is it good?
Mhm. It's good. It's about three young women who discover that people in their lives have been doing magic. So it's fun. For me, it's Schitt's Creek. I'm not all the way through it yet. So
Nice.
it's good. That Kathleen O'Hara, whew, she's awesome.
And if you opened up your phone and went to your most commonly used emoji, what would that be?
The smiley face. Actually, that's not true. The heart. The heart and the smiley face, for sure.
That's very fitting. That's very fitting. Who's your partner in crime?
Keith Curry, president of Compton College. We'll be doing our equity chat tonight with Jihang Lang from the ACCT. Keith and I talk several times a day or text or something like that. And soon you'll see the Equity Avengers are actually going to be advancing our work. So yeah.
Wonderful. That's
yes.
You guys are a great tag team.
Mm-hmm.
What's your favorite baseball team?
The Oakland A's.
Oh,
I grew up
heartbreaking this year.
Yes, for sure. And I know that you're a Dodger fan, and I will forgive you for Kirk Gibson many, many years ago.
Oh, that was just classic.
Yes.
And that's our timer. What's the most common thought you have, Dr. Luster, before you go to bed?
Have I done today what I was meant to do?
And when you wake up in the morning?
Please show me the way to do the best that I can with what I have.
Well, we can see that you are doing more than just the best that you can. We appreciate your leadership in California, your leadership at San Diego Mesa College. I'm so honored to have this conversation with you. Thank you for making time, and keep avenging for all our students. I really appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pam.